Hello, one and all. Welcome to the War Zone. I'm Scruffy, and this is Scruffy Tales. And we're gonna take a look at a sequence from a Finnish TV show called Conflict, where parts of Finland gets invaded by Russia, I believe, and it escalates into proper combat situations with the Navy, with the Air Force, and Army. And in this sequence, we will watch a mechanized assault where you have Finnish armor assaulting Russian positions where the Russians are trying to hold on to a small farmstead. So let's take a look at it. Right, so here we have the Finnish column of armored vehicles. We have two tanks up front, heavy hitters that can take a beating and can dish out a beating. They are advancing in a combat zone, and we can figure this out by looking how the turrets are facing. Slightly left, slightly right, right as well for some reason. He should be going left, but anyway, probably because they are two separate units. So this is a mechanized company, tank company. They are in contact with each other and they have their own communication. Right, left, and down here, right. What you should remember is that vehicles, generally speaking, behave like infantry, right? So this could easily be an infantry column where the lead guy is looking left, then you look right, and so forth and so forth. And what you also need to remember, though, is spacing. This is too tight. The spacing in this formation is too tight, even if they are about to commit to an assault. It's too tight. Imagine if the lead vehicle hits a mine, then everyone needs to stop. They have to hit the brakes. They're gonna bunch up right along this stretch of road right here. They are now all in a kill zone. If you have enemies hiding out on the flanks and they start shooting and the tank weapons, you're bunched up. If the enemy calls in mortars and artillery, you are bunched up. This is a bad formation. Close to combat, you really should have, well, the distance should be from this vehicle to this vehicle. I would argue the distance should perhaps be this vehicle to the vehicle furthest in the back. You really only move this tight, this close, when you're coming around a curve, moving around a terrain feature, so you don't end up losing eye contact with the vehicle up front, so they get knocked out behind the corner. So you bunch up close as you make that corner, move around that terrain feature to protect each other, so no one gets cut off visually. But as a rule, you need to have greater distances between the vehicles for the same reason as infantry, right? Basic concepts for infantry and vehicles, they remain the same. If you bunch up, like if this was infantry, one grenade or one burst of a machine gun could take out 2 or 3 guys. Therefore, spacing so that a grenade or a machine gun burst only kills one guy or wounds the one guy, right? And also, if you step into a minefield, the lead guy is 10 meters ahead of you. The rest of the squad should then not be in the middle of that minefield. So yeah, important to keep that in mind. Vehicles and infantry, the basics are essentially the same. Right, so that's that. Let's see here, they're moving on. We're gonna see artillery piece. I guess artillery is moving in to support the assault. I'm not entirely sure. We'll later on see. Okay, so here we have tanks moving along. I mean, if you remember what I said before, the lead vehicle hitting a minefield or something and everything stops and you get hit from the sides. Take a look at the terrain surrounding this tank, how easy it is for someone to hide, especially in day and age where you have NLAW. At 20 meters into the woods here and firing above this tank and taking it out, right? So it's a real threat. Bunching up is dangerous as hell if all of a sudden a bunch of NLAWs start firing at you. And then we have a drone flying off into the sky. No clue what they're saying in Finnish. CV90 with, I think the Finns have a 30 mil, or is it 35? Not sure. Driving along, and they're talking the mechanized infantry. They have an American with them. And here we have the objective. Let's see here. This mechanized unit, the intent is to assault this farm where we have Russians, and they're gonna go an all-out, wide open field, and they are gonna be driving straight across this field to secure the farm itself. Let's see what happens. Here we go. Tank rolls up and exposes himself. He moves up. Take a look. Take a look what they're doing here. Completely exposing themselves. They should be staying in the tree line, and if they want to take a stop, make a stop to survey the surroundings, stay in cover. Just like infantry. I mean, infantry wouldn't do this. You don't step out of cover and scan for targets. You stay in cover, even with vehicles. In the woods, scan, see what you can see. Is something moving? Heat signatures and what have you. Fun fact, a closed window. You can't see through a window with the infrared and heat signatures, stuff like that. It becomes a blank with the flare, what's it called? I don't know. So that's a good way to mess things up for tanks and what have you. Just keep the windows shut. Anyway, so no, stay in cover and scan for targets. Even better, stay 100 meters into the woods and send out infantry to check, right? You have dismounts, say 1 or 2 guys can move up, scan, see what they're seeing, run back, report, and what have you. So that's also an option. Let's see what happens here. The Finns expose themselves. They've given away everything. Tank takes the lead. This is, let's see here. Here we go. You can see the end of the field right here. Big push on the left. They are going to move over to the right. I'm curious why no one is advancing in the cover over here. They could have moved out here, deployed troops. The troops then move up through the woods here in cover, and you have vehicles left here in the cover here that can cover across the field. Instead they make this big push. Tanks should really be back here as well, covering the advance. So if you move across here with the CV90s, the tanks remain up here, scanning for targets, providing fire support with their big guns. That's not what's going on here. We make an all-out assault, no mortar support. There was no indirect fire as the vehicles were moving up, suppressing the enemy, wounding the enemy, forcing them to deal with a lot of shit before the armor approaches. And no one's firing, no suppression. They're just thundering across this open field. You can see lots of cover on the left flank. They have no cover. They might have potentially driven past enemy positions, and they are now risking getting shot in the ass crossing this field. Like I said, move troops off to the left and have infantry pushing up along the edges of the forest here to secure the flank of the armored assault. Well, here we go. Take a look what happens. Pew! Boom! Anti-tank weapon of some sort hits the tank. Comes to full stop. You have a wheeled vehicle in the back here. What could this be? No clue. And you take a hit here. And now we begin firing way too late. You want to suppress the enemy before you begin the movement. Even if there are no enemies there, why? You don't know, so fire before you move to suppress them if they are present. And the Finns move on. Right, so had the tanks remained behind in the tree line where everyone pushed out, they could have easily seen these Russians as they were sticking their heads over the brim here and opened fire. They could have identified this location as a potential ambush site and kept a gun aimed at it at all times, and so on, and open fire as soon as they saw heads popping up. Tanks are advancing, and it all looks very impressive. And now we dismount. Mechanized infantry rushing out, and this is actually very good. The vehicle commander has taken the vehicle up close to cover, so the vehicle commander will then relay that information back to the dismounts. Cover right, so, or a building right side. So as before they move out, they know where to run to find cover, and the vehicle is close enough for them to reach cover without any issue. And the gun is now should be covering the next threat, which should be the building in front of them. We'll see how that goes, but this is excellent. You drive up close to cover. The commander tells the dismounts, go right, you have cover right next to us. Dismounts running straight for cover. And remember where the CV90 was? Let's see what happens here. This guy has a CV90, what, 20 meters in front of him with that 35 millimeter chain gun. This part of the building should be blasted to kingdom come by the CV90. This should not be an infantry shootout. That CV90 should be obliterating this part of the building, especially since you had all those other vehicles dealing with the Russian threat on the flank. You had 2 other CV90s, you had the 2 tanks. This CV90 should be focusing on this fight right here, and he should be eliminating this building as a feature in the terrain. And he should score 10 kills, killing all the Russians behind and within this building. This is not an infantry fight. The CV90 should be dealing with this, definitely. But we have some shootouts. Russian goes down. And now, this, at first glance, what we're seeing now looks like complete fiction and failure. You have another squad dismounting a CV90. Look what happens. Right out in the open, and they are forced to hit the deck out in the middle of a field. This is basically what you do when you start training the troops how to deal and how to communicate, how to move with the CV90. You dismount and you fan out and you form a line with the CV90 right behind you. This is fine in a forest where you fan out a fire team on either side. You find cover by a rock or a tree, and the CV90 is basically the anchor in the middle of the squad, providing massive amounts of firepower. On an open field like this, everyone's dead. I don't care if there's a CV90 right there. If there's a machine gunner over here, the CV90 is opening fire on this building, and a machine gunner is over here, they're all dead. However, this is still realistic. Remember, it's the commander's job to bring the CV90 to a spot where these guys can dismount safely, close to the objective. In Sweden, we used to say that you dismount anywhere from within 50 to 0 meters from the enemy. So the CV90 should have really driven all the way up to the building, just like the other CV90 did. Straight up here, dismount close, so they only have to run the length of the CV90 plus 3 meters to the wall of this building. But that's when you do things in perfect conditions. It's fully realistic to imagine the commander of the CV90 that he's inexperienced. This is his first firefight, and he could be panicking, right? He's taking shots from RPGs. There are Russians all over the place. He doesn't know if his flanks are secure. He might be afraid to drive all the way up here in case he gets hit by a RPG from over here, right? So he stops, panics, stops, and tells the squad to dismount. Completely realistic. And what's also realistic is that the squad has to deal with it. You have to go with the flow. And when you're out here, you hit the deck to find cover Absolutely, but if you stay in place, you will die. As soon as you dismount, there is only one way, and that way is forward. That is the downside of mechanized infantry, or armored infantry as we call it in Sweden, Panzerskytte, stormtroopers in Norway, armored infantry in Denmark, and armored Jaegers in Finland. Once you're outside, the only way is forward, full speed, aggression, firepower, and they're in a shitty position. If they stay, they die. The only way forward is firing everything you have, make ground, find cover. And here we go. I mean, take a look. This is, like I said, take a look at these guys. Yes, you have all these vehicles covering them, but this, no. Running like this, ready to shoot, no. You run in a straight line. You do not shoot. You just run like a bat out of hell for cover. You do not want to be out here. The vehicles will have to cover you as you advance. You do not run ready to shoot because you don't want to stay out of cover this long needlessly, right? So just run like hell, because take a look at these guys. They have a superior position. They're in cover. They have machine guns, and you're just gonna run ready to shoot. That slows you down, and they will pick you off. The CV90s needs to lay down suppression all along this ridge line, and the infantry just need to run fast as hell to find cover. Yeah, so that's it. These guys then enter a building, comes across a couple of Russians and what have you. And but basically that's all I have you. My review of the mechanized assault. It looks awesome on screen. It is a Hollywood representation. Some tactical flaws here and there, but I think overall it's a good representation. You can see the vehicles advancing, covering the flanks. They are a bit too close, but they are close to going on the assault. When they expose themselves about to cross the field, I'm skeptical. The tanks joining in on the assault looks awesome, but in a mechanized assault, the tanks are the support vehicles. In the larger armored engagements, then they take the front, the lead, and the mechanized units are covering the flanks. But in a mechanized assault, it all becomes reversed. The mechanized units, they take the lead, and the tanks stay back and provide fire support. But then we saw two very realistic situations where a CV90 drives up to cover, dismounts, dismount, and run a short distance into cover. You have a CV90 right on top of the enemy, and that is what mechanized infantry does, right? And then you have a CV90 that makes a mess of the dismounting. They dismount in the open, and it's realistic because the vehicle commander could actually panic. He's terrified of moving up to the objective. He doesn't think his flank is secured, and in a panic he tells the squad to dismount, and they end up in a fucked up situation that they have to deal with. And there you go. I mean, you see people doing this thing all the time when dealing with swords and sword play and sword duels in various movies. Haha, I claim to be an expert. Let me discuss or talk or tell you what I see in the sequence with the swords and shields. So I figured I can do that, being not at all an expert, and evaluating this assault using CV90s and what have you. So I figured, why not? So yeah, I hope you found it interesting, and if you disagree, feel free to leave a comment and tell me how wrong I am and why I should shut the hell up. Okay, anyway, hope you found it interesting and that I'll see you in the next one. Bye.